We are called the next panel. Definitely, if you guys actually have time at lunchtime or during, we have happy hours after the event, you can definitely look her up and have more conversation of the business plan. And then if you guys like to have a copy of it, just let us know. We'll be happy to send you a PDF for it. Okay. So we get next panel. We have them come up: Shannon, Joanna, Seth, and Kristen. We're going to talk about one of our favorite topic: how to build trust and transparency with the buyers.
So we got Shannon, Kristen, Joanna, and Seth.
Yes. Yeah. You do. Yeah. Yeah. This one. Yeah.
I can't fix that one or this one.
You can use your mic.
This doesn't match my outfit. It was blue.
Do you want mine?
Tracy's better.
Okay.
There's yellow up there.
Hello?
Okay, we're going to jump right into changing topics. Our topic is building trust and transparency with buyers. So I'm going to moderate and just turbo round very quickly names, just introductions, where you're from and who you are.
I'm Kristen Francis. I'm from the DC area, which includes Virginia, DC, and Maryland. If you haven't heard of it, then it's new.
I'm Seth Levin from New York City, been in the business for 22 years and run a relatively small team.
I'm Shannon Maxwell. I'm from Nashville, Tennessee. I'm also licensed in Kentucky and Alabama, and I've been licensed for about 19 years total.
I'm Joanna Parker Lentz, missing a Z in my name. Thankfully not a screw loose, just a letter. I've been doing this for 25 years with my teammate Jody Rubenstein. We run a very small team. We've been doing it forever.
And you're right here in Short Hills.
I'm right here in Short Hills, and I've run 5 New York City marathons, so I know how you're feeling.
Awesome, that's great. Perfect, so I'm going to ask this question to all of you, and so just jump in if you like. With the new landscape and the recent NAR settlement, what information do you provide up front to set realistic expectations with your clients, with your buyers specifically, since this is about buyers?
Can I go first because it's low-hanging fruit, and then you can all say, yeah, what she said?
Yeah,
Absolutely. We joked about that on the way here. So I think the most important tool for us is the seller net sheet for sellers. That is the easiest way to explain what commissions are, what concessions are, what the difference is between the two. At the end of the day, the seller really doesn't care other than what money are they going to have in their pocket when they leave. And as far as buyers go, same thing. Nothing's changed. We're just putting different numbers in different columns. And at the end of the day, you need to know how much money you're bringing to the table. So we can do buyer closing sheets and seller net sheets. And it's just the math, and it keeps mathin'.
Awesome. Okay.
What she said. So obviously, this is hugely important right now. We've actually been working on this in our weekly meetings for the last 12 weeks. Usually we rotate topics, but we've been really concentrating on the buyer consultation, setting expectations, and removing certain negatives. Obviously, there's negative connotations with some of this, but really fundamentally nothing has changed. Especially in Manhattan, I've not seen one seller not offer commission so far. However, my team does work in some of the boroughs where commission has been lighter than we've hoped for in the past. So we've always had this conversation about net, about value, about where things land as opposed to how we get there. And it's value. It's not asking price. It's what you spend, not how you spend it, and what you get at the end. So it's really setting the expectation up front that nothing changes. We're here to maximize the opportunity for you, and that has not changed.
I have a little something to add. I think we've always done buyer consultations. We've always educated our clients from start to finish. I think the most important thing is just to tell people, really, don't panic. This hasn't changed. And while we're expected to provide more transparency on our team, we've always been transparent. We've always talked about commission. It doesn't just show up at the closing date of, oh my God, I can't believe that's what this person's getting paid. We try to talk about it from start to finish, and that makes it less scary for the buyers and for the sellers. The buyers right now, I feel, are worried that they have to commit money that they weren't committing prior. And we try to explain to them, you've always been committing that money. It's just been wrapped into your mortgage. So we have to decide from the beginning, is the seller going to pay that at closing and it gets wrapped into your mortgage? Or if the seller says no, what the difference is that you might be willing to pay. In our area as well, we have not been stuck with situations yet where sellers are refusing to pay commissions. So knock on wood, we can still educate our sellers. And it's up to us in this room to do that. Don't just sit there blindly saying, oh, okay, we'll let the buyers, pay the commission. You have to explain to your clients, sellers and buyers alike, what the repercussions are from start to finish. And if you can do that in an educated, calm manner and teach them why it's important to pay a buyer's agent, then you've done your job.
Shannon?
Yeah, I agree on that. So, I mean, really, truthfully, in our area, like, I've gotten a raise. So in our contract, truthfully, we've never really had much issues with, commissions. And, I like to say compensation, not commission, because that's just a smoother word to say, because you're getting compensated. It's not just money coming back as a commission. But I've always been a higher compensation for many years in my state, mainly because if you want me and not a showing assistant, I bring more value to walking into the showings and things of that nature. So I've always charged, a higher percentage there. But really, we need to love on our buyers the same way we love on our sellers. We have, seller guides and we have seller appointments and we walk them through that. We should be doing that for our buyers every step of the way. And this is what our expectations is. This is what this looks like. And every deal, it's a structured settlement. Like, hey, this is how we go in. This is our strategy. And this is how we move forward with it. I mean, I don't think there's any difference in what we're doing. It's just on paper, just like commercial. Commercial's been like this for, 15, 20, 50 years, where everyone's commissions have been, right out on the table. And the best thing with them is we do stories like where it's like, hey, this is where the buyer missed out because there was not transparency in this transaction and everyone was hurt on it because of this situation. So once they hear that, most people are like, oh, I get it, I understand.
Well, these four people, what are we hearing, right? Confidence, they're bullish, they're not hiding from these conversations. They're using this as an opportunity to be consultative and transparent and really score points with their buyers on being the experts on what they do. One thing I heard you guys say essentially is clear and consistent communication and expectations. I'll ask this to you, Joanna. How do you ensure, throughout the process, that you are clear and consistent with your communication? I love the stories, by the way, the stories example, but
Well, I think you have to be confident in your honesty.
Yeah.
If you cannot be honest in a transaction, if you can't explain to your clients how this will go from A to Z, if you don't know the contract, and I get the contracts are newer, but study them. My partner and I actually, when we started out in our business for the first 2 years, we carried a pre-filled contract out in our purses for 2 years. We didn't feel comfortable with the statements without that backup because we had to go study it before we presented it to a client. Educate yourself first. Know what you're selling to your clients. Make them understand that this is a natural transaction that every other buyer is going to have to go through. It's not rocket science. Know what you're telling them. It's not that different, and be very honest. Don't make things up, and if you don't know it, learn it. Ask your manager, ask somebody, ask a colleague who you trust to go through it. My partner and I sat for 4 hours and got tutored on this new contract because we're like, we just want to understand when there's objections. Figure out your objections. Have dialogue with your team. Sit down with them. Go over it with them. Make sure that everyone who's representing you is actually saying what you're confident in representing and being honest.
Awesome. Seth, do you want to take that same answer, consistency?
Yeah, what she said. But it's the way I want to live, but it's definitely the way I want to communicate with my clients. I call it compassionate candor. I want to be empathetic. I want to understand what's important to them, what motivates them, but I want to be incredibly honest. I don't want to sugarcoat things. I'm a big, everything is a negotiation. The most important negotiations are with our clients. They're demonstrating our value, but it's also, I'm big in removing negatives. Not brushing them under the rug, but dealing with them right up front. These are things that could happen. And this is the way we're going to deal with them. And then we set expectations for how things are going to move throughout the process. And we're consultative, we're advisors. And I tell people right off the bat, obviously I'm going to get paid when and if you transact, but you have an advisor and a consultant for life. Lucky for you, it's me. But, I'm here to guide you through the process. And we let them know when certain benchmarks are going to come up. We let them know, again, it's not necessarily asking price and discount from asking price. I really want to establish a target on value and maximizing an opportunity to beat the value, as opposed to trying to get a certain percent off of ask, or setting the expectation that we're not in a race to find listings. If you're not sleeping at 4 a.m, you're probably looking at listings. I might be reading something else. However, what you have from me is a guide to get you away from problematic issues, problematic properties, and towards good opportunities that are saleable, have good future appreciation, and just set those expectations that that's what's going to happen in the process.
I love that. It's a great way to look at it and set yourself apart on what you do and really what you don't. So as buyer's agents, right, we help them make informed decisions, and we are the market experts. I'll turn this to Kristen. How do you demonstrate market expertise when you're helping buyers make informed decisions? When you're talking to them, how do you demonstrate to them that they're in good hands and you've got this in terms of market expertise?
So to begin with, and to sort of piggyback on the last question, we created the perfect buyer consult, or what we believe to be the perfect buyer consult. We have the conversation with all of the education packed in up front. So we say, listen, it's our job to interpret the market. We're not going to tell you which house to buy. We're not going to tell you what the final sales price is, but we're going to empower you with all of the education that we have in our interpretation of the market so that you can make the most educated decision. So we spend 2 hours up front with our buyers, giving them the education from start to finish. It's also consistent across team members. That's one of the most difficult things that we had to do. I have a nearly 100% conversion rate with any client that you put in front of me, but that doesn't mean that my teammates do. So what we did is we collected all of our scripts, which is really just storytelling, and we put it in order, and everyone can deliver the exact same buyer consult from start to finish in their own voice. So they may have their own stories, but if I were to say, hey, what's the good, fast, cheap, pick 2 script, they can repeat it off the top of their head. So I know that when a buyer comes to our team, no matter who they're working with, they have the exact same education up front. And what we say is, we don't expect you to have all of this information memorized now. We just want it to sound familiar when we come around to it the second time. So we will also go through the contract with them up front so it's not a surprise and we're not learning on the job when we're bidding on a home. So we front load all of the information and then we come into the sections. When we're in negotiations and we're looking for that home, we'll say, listen, this particular neighborhood historically has multiple offers. 2 streets over, you're probably going to be the only offer in hand. And we look at that data, we show them what the market has been doing, similar to what we do in a listing appointment to say, this is the competitive market analysis. We're doing that with buyers too. So we'll say, if we're looking at $1 million home, that's probably going to have 7 to 8 offers on it. So it's likely to land closer to, a 1.15 than it is to $1 million. If you're not comfortable with that, we need to back down in the price range that we're shopping for. So we give them all of that competitive information up front. We let them know whether they're likely to be asked to waive inspection or financing and how we get around that so that they don't feel the pressure in that moment. They know after working with us, when we've done all of that full education loop, that we've covered all of the bases.
You kind of overwhelm them in a good way with everything they need to know.
Just a quick follow-up. Remember that when you have that 2-hour consultation, and I think a buyer consultation is really important, they might remember 10% from start to finish. They're typically, and you as a realtor have to remember that buying a home is more stressful than planning a wedding, than going to a new school for your kids. Like, this is one of the most stressful environments for anyone to go through, and you need to be mindful of it, and you need to be sympathetic and empathetic. That's, I think, what we're all saying. And then remind them in ways that you're not an asshole through the transaction, but you have to remind them, and you have to be kind about it, and not like, well, I told you that 15 times already.
Yeah.
But it's your job to maintain that transaction process and keep their expectations and remind them nicely.
I love it. Shannon, let's go to you. What strategies do you use to make buyers feel heard and understood? Because they are overwhelmed. Like you said, we do this. This is pretty much a foreign language to them. How do you calm them down, kind of allay their fears?
Well, so essentially, every one of our clients, they're humans, they're not transactions. So the second you start treating them like a transaction, they're going to feel like they're not heard, and they put that wall up. So if you actually want to guide these people in home ownership, you have to guide them as you're hearing them, you're listening to them. And essentially, when you're talking to them, shut up. Let them talk, it's not about you, it's about them, and it's about you meeting them where they are. Because essentially, it doesn't matter if it's a $3 million property or a $300,000 property, this is the most expensive purchase that they will ever buy at that moment, most of the times, unless it's an investor. So, you have to, even if this is a second home, right? This is a second home at a different price point. What does that look like? Now they have to sell a home to buy a home. It's a whole nother process that each individual person is different. Every transaction and every file that you have, it doesn't matter if you've done 300 transactions. 301 is going to be different, that you didn't know that there was going to be something that came out of left field, and we deal with that every day. Like, you don't hire me to essentially open up a door. You hire me to be in the trenches with you when things go bad. And that's where you need to trust me. And that's where ultimately I am the best for you, and how to show that value of that. I have to tell people the same thing and be very honest and transparent, because I have conversations with people all day, every day. I can't afford to not be honest and upfront, because I don't know what I said to you 2 days ago, because I've just had 700 conversations between our conversation on Monday and on Wednesday. So, it's those moments where, you're hearing them, we're putting them into our database, but whoever's showing them properties, we're also taking notes of what they're saying as they're going through the house. Oh, you know what? They really like this candle smell. Oh, they really like this color floor. They like this cabinet color. And this is all going into our CRM. So as we're processing and we're going through, we're going, you know what? Maybe let's call these off markets, because I know from these pictures, this is the style home that they like.
So you're not only active listening, but you're paying attention. I tell
Absolutely.
my team, do not look at your phone when you're doing a showing. Just pay attention to the buyers. What are they smiling at? What are they making a face at? How are they looking at each other?
Take notes. That's really important. Take notes, however
yeah.
you take notes on your phone. I do it in my notes app.
Yeah.
So we take pictures as well. As we're going through the houses, they have a picture of the front house, and then they are to take 3 or 4 pictures of the home as you're walking through that they like. And then we actually have a Google Drive per client that it's all of these photos that they like of these homes. So then when that happens, we have a profile of their type of home that they like.
Hopefully you guys are getting a few nuggets here. They're like, wow, that's a great idea. I don't do that. I'm going to start doing that. These are gems. I love that. So anyone who wants to chime in on this, any other tools you'd recommend that kind of enhance transparency with buyers? Obviously, we talked about the net sheet. That's a great tool. Even having the shared drive of what they're using, but just specific tools that kind of get you and the buyer on the same page.
So we share our Google Drive with our clients as well. So as we put things in there photo-wise, we remind them the reason why they don't like that home, or the reason why they do like that home. So this way, if they've seen 50 homes, and they go, oh, I think I really like that home. And then you go, oh, well, that one was actually by the railroad, and you didn't like that. So then it's like, oh, okay, well, now that's off, because as much as we love people who make decisions, most of our clients don't make decisions very easily, and they kind of flip-flop, especially when there's a lot of homes on the market in that area. So we do share that. But I think transparency wise, the biggest thing is knowing the contracts and knowing them well. As much as we love our brokers, they can't always be on call with us all of the time. And in Tennessee, our contracts are very gray, unlike most states that are black and white. Like, this is the date and this is when it's due by. With us, it's the wild, wild west. We have a whole paragraph in the bottom that I can literally write anything I want that changes the top of that paragraph.
Wow.
So,
I love
I
that.
mean, it's just, it's insanity, truly, and so what we do is every year we pay for a real estate attorney to come in and teach us, what can I do to protect my client? What word can I change in this type of verbiage to protect me from my seller, protect me from my buyer? All of these things, because ultimately at the end of the day, when something goes south, what's going to be held up in court? Like, that's really what that is. And, we can only bring them so far. We're there to protect them within the contract. But what happens after the contract? And that's a transparency that, we try to, help each other with, throughout the time.
I mean, you're bulletproofing the transaction. You guys are all education-based. You're literally students of the craft in terms of learning how to be the best at this so that we can coach them. Anything else you guys want to add, Kristen? Sorry.
Go ahead. So there is a specific tool that we adopted last year called Final Offer. I don't know if you have it here yet. Have you heard of it? Raise your hand.
Final offer?
Okay, well, it's like if Zillow and eBay had a baby. It's an offer management platform, and it has the entire MLS available on it, and it has a user interface that's similar to Zillow, so it's kind of sexy. But what it does is it actually makes public the offer management. So if there's a listing in your neighborhood, and as the offers come in, they're online, and if it meets a certain criteria, it will become public information. So the neighbors can watch the bidding in real time. And what's great about that, especially in the landscape that we're in, sometimes, you have to convince your buyers that this is where it's gonna go, and they're like, no, they're lying, they're posturing, and then we're like, great, let's write that 42-page offer that we know isn't gonna get accepted. I wanna do that on Thanksgiving. So it'll spare you that, and also you don't have to write up the offer until your offer is actually accepted. So the tool is to watch the public bidding, and then you can see what the home sold for, how many offers they got, what the terms were. And there's a lot that's great about the platform too. It's actually like a lead generation tool. But the auction goes that once the minimum terms have been met, kind of like eBay, then there's an auction window that opens and the highest bidder wins at the end, unless someone comes in and hits the final offer button, which is like the buy it now button in eBay. So it gets really exciting, and it's a great lead generation tool, but it really does address that transparency issue. And you have to be an agent or have an agent to use the platform. So it's very agent friendly.
Joanne, did you want to?
One thing I just wanted to add is make sure that your team behind the scenes has the tools. I think to share the tools with your client could be very overwhelming, and it's your job to be the expert. I don't need to share my tools with my clients. I need to make sure my clients are on top of things, and I want to make sure that they feel comforted through the whole transaction, that we have your back. We have your front, we have your back, and we're going to remind you, because quite frankly, you can share all the lists you want from the beginning and say, from A to Z, this is what you can expect, but you can take this, and if you're going to plug it into your calendar, fabulous, but don't worry about it. Between your attorney and us and our team, we will make sure that we send you reminders, and we love the Google platform. I like anything free as well. I'm certainly not opposed to paying for things, and I pay for a lot, but I do love the free, and I happen to love the Google products. So we're big spreadsheeters, and our team will use the spreadsheet so that we can see things in live time anywhere we are to see where the transaction is. That also goes into our calendars, and we have shared calendars, at least two or three of the three of us do, so that we can see, like, okay, the reminder's going to be sent that your deposit is due, and we tell our admin, like, don't say to the client, your deposit's due tomorrow, because they might be moving money around. So be cognizant of their lives. Be cognizant if they're busy, if they're working. You need to give them reminders and re-reminders, because sometimes the reminder a week ago falls by the wayside because they're traveling from Europe back to America and they didn't see your email. So just be cognizant of their lives and meet them where they are, right?
Well, switching gears, and it's part of building trust, how do you manage expectations with your buyers about negotiations? Negotiations is one of the biggest things we do for buyers, and how do you set the tone of, this is my role, and this is how this is gonna go? Shannon?
Well, so I think we set expectations, at the very beginning, when we're in our buyer consultation, that this is what it is. And then we just keep going back to that expectation as, this is what this looks like. I don't want to consider our clients as toddlers, right? But essentially it's that same thing, right? Like, okay, this fire is hot, don't touch it, and you keep going back to, okay, this fire is hot, don't touch it. And eventually they kind of understand, okay,
them.
this is, what we hired you for. But, it's also making them feel validated in what they're saying. So if you're saying, hey, this property's $800,000, and they go, oh, well, I want to offer $750,000. I understand that you want to offer $750,000. I don't see that, but why do you see that? Like, let me dig into those details for you, and let's have a conversation. And then if you still feel after our conversation that you want to go in at $750,000 instead of $8,000, absolutely, I have your back. But that's a strong, indication that we're probably not going to get that deal. And I probably allow like 1 or 2 deals written where it's kind of out of there before I'm like, okay, well, now it's the third, can we do it my way?
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
and then
You've
we go
touched
from
the
there.
pot, you've burned your hand a couple
Yes.
times. Exactly, Seth?
Yeah, no, education is key. So I've been teaching a negotiation class for over 10 years, and one of the things that maybe about 8 years ago I realized is I was doing a lot of things behind the scenes that the clients weren't aware of, and if something went off course, they didn't know what was happening. Not that things went off course very often, but I think it's really important that people understand what you're doing, when you're doing it, and you need to set that expectation up front. And again, I'm very big on letting people know that New York City is always bifurcated. It could be the hottest sellers market and some segments not doing well, and vice versa. So we're not negotiating the same way on every property. So I really want to establish up front, I know I said this before, that we're focusing on value and getting you the best value possible, and every negotiation is different. If we see something that's undervalued, we're going to pounce, and we're not going to care about discount. If we see something that's overpriced, we're going to negotiate very different. So I want to explain to them that there's multiple streams, there's multiple types of negotiation that would happen in the same market, so that they're not just tied to an expectation of 5% off. However, I am going to show them overarching market data that in this specific market segment, and I'm very big on market segmentation and showing them 12 to 16 data points for each market segment that they're considering, and then showing them the average listing discount for each property, but explaining that agents have different strategies for pricing. So one agent may overprice by 10%, so we want to get 15% off. Somebody might underprice by 5%, so potentially we're trying to get the property there, or maybe we're going to have to pay a little bit more. So it's really setting the expectation that every negotiation is different, but also keeping them apprised of everything you're doing during the process, so they don't miss what you're doing, so that you have a shared reference point to go back to together if you have to move to another property. Right.
Anyone else want to add anything?
I think it's also important to educate your clients from the beginning that negotiating is not just about price. Sometimes negotiation could be a really incredible term. And you want to find out from the listing agent, and presumably you've got the relationships out there. For me, half the battle is making sure that my relationships are secure with people like you guys in this room, to make sure that when I approach you as the listing agent, I have a buyer, that you're confident I'm going to bring the deal to the end. We've had so many offers accepted, even in the best of markets, not because we were the highest, but because we were the best. The entire package was the best, and they were confident in our team getting the deal from start to finish. The conversations we're having these days, I'm not sure if you guys are having the same across the country, but the calls before they accept an offer is, how committed is your buyer? My client's about to accept your offer and you're $50,000 less. How committed is your buyer? Tell me more about them. You're not giving the stories anymore because we're not allowed to, but you want to know that you're getting into real estate bed with somebody who can actually, bring it to a close, and that your buyer really means it, and they're not just putting 5 offers out there just because they want to see what they get, and then they might bail tomorrow.
We're incredibly strategic when we go into negotiations, so we have that partnership with our client, whether we're on the buyer side or the seller side, to determine what fair market value is for that home. And then every dollar under or over, depending on who you're representing, is just bragging rights. So we'll say, listen, this is what fair market value is, and every dollar over or under that is bragging rights. Will you empower me to fight to that number? I will do everything I can to get above or below, but will you empower me? So let's decide on that number now so that we don't have scope creep, so that if you lose that bidding war, you're not losing sleep at night because you decided if it was $1 over that, you weren't taking it. Fine. And same thing with the sellers. And so I just say, listen, let's agree on the number, and I'm gonna go fight my battles, and I'm gonna use all the strategery available, and I'm gonna come back to you and say, this is your property to lose, or this is your offer to accept. And so if they leave the negotiations to me, understanding how strategic I'm going to be, and I outline how I'm going to do it, but I don't have to keep coming back to them to have those individual conversations.
Awesome. So we've heard a lot of great things, and just to wrap up, I'm going to put these guys on the spot and try to get them to not repeat. I want you to leave them with one thing they need to know that ideally we didn't talk about, or, so we're not saying like what I said 3 times already. Like one magic kind of piece of advice you can tell the audience that they must do to build trust and transparency with buyers. We'll just go down the line.
You go first? Okay. Yeah. So one thing that we didn't talk about is bringing your clients to safety, and that is the magic in building the trust and creating that rapport. So we actually do a lot of exercises in our team to not just mirror and match, but for example, we took the election and I said, let's have a really controversial conversation. And I have people on both sides of the aisle on my team. And I said, let's talk about it and see if you can get somebody to the other side. And they were all up in their seats like this. And I said, okay, well, do you think based on this conversation that you would be able to change my mind? And they said, no, because you're not open to the conversation. And I said, no, what you've taught me is that my opinions are not respected and there's no place for my voice here. So I use examples like that to help them understand how to mirror and match to create trust with their clients. And I said, if you can't bring yourself to safety, you can't bring your client to safety.
I love that. Seth?
All right, I'm between 2 things, but there's a reason my name is Storytime Seth. That's my nickname. I like to tell stories, and one of my favorite stories of all my years in real estate is that I had a recent grad from Cornell Law School. His parents were gifting him $3 million to buy a place in New York. It's a story as old as time in New York. But he wound up telling me something during the transaction, or we had negotiated, we were actually getting ready for him to sign the contract. And he mentioned something to me because I'm always asking questions throughout the process. And it didn't seem like the time frame was right for him to purchase and be an owner in New York, so I convinced him to rent. Gave up a $3 million sale. 2 years later, he gave me a $400,000 buyer, which was somebody else who graduated from Cornell Law School. And I knew that this was going to be a really fertile future network for me. So I actually, much lower than a price point that I typically would work with, I worked with her, got her the property. It led subsequently since 2015 to $100 million worth of closed business through her friends and their friends. So my biggest piece of advice is take the consultative advisory seriously. Don't be, and I know we've said this, don't be attached to transactions, because a lot of times the no's lead to way more than the yeses if you're pushing somebody into a situation that's not right for them. It's going to be a dead end. Yep.
I love that.
So I think my biggest thing is remember the customer service piece. Like, we're a customer service business that helps people and guide them into home ownership. We're not salespeople. We're way more than that. So when we get back to that, we're dealing with people, remember people and their feelings. And just like when you have a problem at a hotel or a credit card and you want to speak to that customer service representative and you want to feel like you're heard and that you're loved on, that's what your clients want to feel like as well.
I think for me, the most important thing with buyer or seller clients is do not think that this is a transaction from A to Z that ends at closing day. Approach the transaction and convince your buyers that you mean it, that you are their realtor for life, that your relationship really starts when the transaction is over. Because, let's be frank, you want referrals, right? You can't just expect someone to give you referrals. They need to trust you. And if you haven't built that trust from A to Z in that transaction, then you failed. And you had better start at that first buyer presentation to convince your client that when they move to wherever they move, you are there for them. You're there for them for kind of almost all of their needs.
I love it. You guys did a great job. Thank you.